In this video, I'll be teaching you how to write a CCOT LEQ. CCOT stands for continuity and change over time. You'll be writing an essay that talks about a long period of time in which there's change and there's things that stay the same. Here is the prompt for LEQ number 4. Evaluate the extent to which voter participation changed in the United States in the period from 1700 to 1877. When looking at a prompt like this, you need to look first at the dates. So you know it's going to take place from colonial America through 1877, which is the end of Reconstruction. Here, you know it's a CCOT because it says the extent to which something changed. Okay? So you're going to write an essay telling me how much something changed or how much it stayed the same. The first step in writing a CCOT essay is you need to draw a timeline and label the start and stop dates. The start date is in your prompt. It's the year 1700. The stop date is also in the prompt. It's 1877. The next step is you need to identify 5 significant events related to the topic and address all aspects of the date range. So when looking at this timeline, you need to come up with something from 1700 or around 1700 that has to do with voter participation. You need to have at least something in the middle between it. And then you definitely have to address something about voter participation in 1877. You must cover the entire range of the prompt. First, we're going to go over some examples of how voter participation changed between 1700 and 1900. Let's start with in order. In the early 1700s, remember that only white landowners and church members could vote. The first major change that you're going to see is that new state constitutions will lower land qualifications and remove church membership requirements. This would be the first example of a major change in voter qualifications. The next major change happens in the age of Jackson, with universal male suffrage, where in many states, land qualifications were completely eliminated. The final one is the 15th Amendment that happens towards the end of Reconstruction. This is where African American men are granted the right to vote. Here you see there are at least 3 major changes in voter qualifications in this 200-year period. Now we're going to look at the continuity, things that did not change between 1700 and 1900 when it comes to voter qualifications. Number 1, throughout this entire 200-year period, white males could vote. That's one example of a continuity. A second example is that women were not allowed to vote in national elections. Although some states in the West allowed women to vote, you could use a continuity saying that women couldn't vote at the national level. And then finally, African Americans could not vote in the South. Remember, there are ways in the South that African Americans were kept from voting. You would use those as examples to support that particular claim. Overall, you'll notice that there are more changes than continuities. Therefore, that's going to be the focus of your paper. You will choose 3 changes for your body paragraphs and 1 continuity for your concession paragraph. I'll talk about the outline at the very end. Now that you've done your 2 timelines, you need to put your thesis together. All those statements going to be your concession or continuity that you chose from the orange timeline. Your A, B, and C statements are going to be from your blue timeline, the 3 major changes. They must be in chronological order. Your therefore statement is simply going to say that there are more changes than continuity, tying the whole thesis together. Now let's talk about the pre-context. Remember that a pre-context, you must answer the question, what caused this situation? And since we're talking about voting, you need to go all the way back to the beginning. You need to talk about the House of Burgesses in Virginia or the town halls in New England. You'll need to ace a paragraph about the development of democracy in the American colonies and talk about who is allowed to vote in those particular colonies. Remember to use the first example from your change timeline to help you develop this ACE. Finally, let's talk about your post-context. Remember, when you're writing a post-context, you're telling your reader what the effect of the situation was. You're going to describe it during ACE. I'm going to give you 4 examples of possible post-context you could use. All of these are things that we have not taught you yet, so you'll need to do a little bit of research on your own, or use the one that makes the most sense to you. Number 1, you can use the 19th Amendment. The next unit we're going to talk about the progressive era, but you could easily use women's suffrage as an extension of voter participation after the time period in the prompt. The second example would be during the Civil Rights Movement. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 bans the use of literacy tests that kept African Americans from registering to vote. A third example would also come from the Civil Rights Movement. The 24th Amendment bans poll taxes, which also kept African Americans from registering to vote in the post-Reconstruction period all the way until the mid-20th century. Finally, another example would be the Vietnam War. The 26th Amendment will lower the voting age from 21 to 18, allowing more people to vote. This was passed as a result of anti-war protests. Use one of these examples as your post-context after you repeat your thesis. Here's the outline of your CCOT LEQ. The first paragraph is no different. It'll be your pre-contextualization plus your thesis statement. Remember to use the formula that we taught you. It may be a little different for this one because it's got an A, B, and C and an X. So it'll be although X, A, B, and C, therefore Y. Your second paragraph will have changes 1 and 2, your A and your B statements. Remember that your A, B, and C statements have to be in chronological order. So A is going to be your state constitutions, B is going to be Jackson, C is going to be 15th Amendment. Your continuity statement or your X statement is going to be one of the 3 choices from a previous slide, either women, white males, or African Americans. And then finally, your last paragraph will be your restatement of your thesis plus your post-contextualization.